Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Geek Day. And I have the unique opportunity and privilege to kick off the second segment of the keynote here, and that's actually going to be a discussion about software-defined networking. And we're doing this in a pretty interesting way, as we're actually going to bring up on stage 4 of our SDN partners, and one at a time. And we're going to give them 10 minutes and about 5 slides to describe how they use software-defined networking in their products and how their products exhibit the different aspects or the different facets of that particular technology. So this is the list here, and we'll have Brian Workballs come in and actually moderate that session and introduce those technologists. So the first question is why are we here? Why are we even starting to think about software-defined networking? And to prove that point, or at least to explain that point, I put up a network diagram from somewhere around 2006. So this is a very technical diagram. I don't expect you to understand all of it. But until recently, our networks were very static. There was really no reason to move workloads from one place to another. Applications were often self-contained and didn't have to go anywhere. And networks were designed to be static intentionally, and we were looking for stable, and there was very little use case or business case to move a network or to provide mobility for a network. Network devices were also designed in this way. We intimately attach the control planes, or the brains of the device, to the part that does the work, which is the forwarding plane. And that kept us in a very stable environment, very predictable, and all these devices could run in a standalone fashion. Then came cloud. So you remember cloud? It's probably the biggest hype over the past 5 years. And what clouds did is it really drove the compelling reason that we're now talking about software-defined networking. Cloud computing demands that IT resources and services need to be abstracted from the underlying architecture and provided in a on-demand and at-scale format. So that's a pretty tall order. The folks in compute and the folks in storage have figured this out. We went through a phase of virtualization. We've gone through a phase of automation. We're now into an orchestration process. And unfortunately, even though cloud showed us what is possible, cloud also dramatically increases the complexity of networking. So where are we now? We're very much behind the 8 ball. From a networking perspective, we have not kept up with the capabilities of cloud computing. Storage and compute figured out how to automate and orchestrate, and networking services need to match those capabilities. We need to have the ability to match the mobility aspects that are already available in compute and storage. So that's what software-defined networking is all about. It's essentially the ability to programmatically define networks and network service policies, just like we did in compute and storage, and the capability to move them seamlessly from one location to another. So just like we had workload mobility, just like we have application mobility, we now have to have network mobility. So what's the business value of it? You can derive business value from SDN when we provide configuration and automation of the entire network and fabric. And so these systems can be rapidly deployed, and they can also create new business opportunities and also reduce the cost of doing business. So just like anything else in technology, once we solve one problem, we're going to create several more that we have to solve later on. So the new problem stems around how we work with networks today. The graphic up here shows 2 boxes, an operating system and the user interaction. And that box also represents the complexity, the amount of complexity that we have to deal with in our current environment. So now I was talking with Joe Koenig last night, who's the president of WWT, and he reminded me of the law of conservation of complexity. So if any of you are aware of Larry Tesler, Larry was an engineer with Apple back in the mid-'80s, and he was talking about the complexity that users have to deal with to work with a particular technology. Obviously, at that time, they were going from command line type interactions with computers to GUIs, And so he was referring to the removal of the complexity from the end user and putting it back into the operating system or putting it back into an application. So the law pretty much states that you can't reduce the complexity of a given task beyond a certain point. Once you've reached that point of complexity, all that you can do is shift it around. So what's happening and what's new in software-defined networking is we're now making the complexity greater. So you notice the green box is bigger, but we also now have a new element of complexity, and that's the application itself. So who are the players in software-defined networking? What I did is I went out to a site called SDN Central. I pulled a bunch of the logos off of there. Certainly not all of them, but I wanted to have some representation up here. And you'll see highlighted in the middle the 4 vendors that we're going to have up on stage here a little bit later on. But one thing to be aware of is software-defined networking has many facets. If you Google the topic, you may run into OpenStack or OpenFlow. Or you may find that there's a lot written about virtualized networking in the data center environment. But there's much, much more to that. And our mission at WWT is to help provide clarity as to what they mean for your business. So the solutions. So spend time today downstairs in the Geek Lab. I went down there. I was out there yesterday while everybody was coming in and setting up. And I got to tell you, it's a really exciting place to be. It's interesting. The ceilings are low. It's very wide and flat. So it's a fun place to hang out unless you're tall like Rich. But talk to the people in the Geek Lab. Go to the breakout sessions. Sit in at the Birds of Feathers sessions. All of those are just going to be a wealth of information for you. And go to the vendors and ask them how they're dealing with, how are they providing, how are they reducing the complexity of software-defined networking. And now I want to go ahead and introduce Brian Ortbals, and he's going to introduce our 4 presenters for the topic of software-defined networking. Brian?